it just, you put yourself in a room surrounded by people that are kind of where you think you want to be, and then you start to listen to what they're doing, and then you just kind of implement what you can, right? It starts early. I mean, like early on, I remember hearing, why I kind of transitioned careers was the whole interview your future, go to work and talk to somebody that's been there 20 years longer than you and see if that's a lifestyle you want. And if it's not, then maybe things got to change, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, and then so I changed careers and I look at the people that are, quote unquote winning at a high level. And I'm like, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that I'm not? And so you start that, and then you just kind of implement some things. And
on today's show, I have Tyrell Shepherd. Tyrell's been in business for about 11 years, and he's a senior marketing director with WFG. He's a husband to an awesome wife, Julie. He's a father to two beautiful little girls. There's 4-year-old Rhea and 1-year-old Maya. He's a former collegiate hockey player. I remember watching this guy on TSN. He actually won the TELUS Cup. It's a AAA midget. Actually, TELUS Cup was Air Canada Cup. Hold, man, aging us. Okay, anyway. I'm also very proud to call this guy my friend. He's been my friend for, I think over 25 years. So just really proud of everything he's done. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with him.
You're listening to the Revive Couple Podcast. We're Michael and Laura, and together we'll explore everything relationships, personal responsibility, feminine and masculine dynamics, communication, and just some all-around real and raw conversations.
Drawing from our 18 years together, with a bit of sarcasm, humor, tears, a few and lots of love, we deep dive into the male and female perspectives on relationships and navigating the highs and lows of life together. Sit back, grab your love mug, and let's get into today's conversation.
Tyrell, welcome.
Well, thank you. Welcome. Hi to you. So it's good. Where do we start? What do you want to know?
No, it's great having you, buddy. I'm excited to have you on here. I know we talk a lot all the time, but just wanted to again say thanks for coming on and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and where you started and how you got all the way to where you are now with WFG.
Well, in 1984, November 8th, it was a cold day, I was told, and Mom ended up in the hospital and gave birth to, her son. Fast forward 37, almost 38 years, and here we are today, right? With some stuff in between. But no, it's been, I guess, on the life side, business side, it's been 11 years, like you said, and with World Financial Group, and it's been a lot of learning, still learning to this day on how to do it better and do life better and be a better husband and father and friend and all that kind of stuff. But it's just kind of been a journey. I don't know, you learn. I was given some advice early on, stay confused and stumble forward, and I thought I could do both of those really well, and it's kind of led to some good things in our life. And man, I don't know, it's the Coles Notes version right there, I guess.
Oh, I like it. What I know so much, so I got to try to pull some out. But so what was the deal? So we said collegiate hockey. So you played, let's skip high school and all that other fun stuff. So you're in college, and what did you study? What did that look like? And
it looked like a lot of fun, too much fun. But it was, playing hockey, you always get to delay life. You don't have to make any major decisions. And then all of a sudden that kind of stage of life ended and it was time to go to university. So I got a phys ed degree. Just because it was like, well, that makes sense, right? You're an athlete, you take phys ed and you carry on with life. And so I did that, got my degree 4 years, and they told me to go back to school for 2 more years and get my education degree and become a school teacher. And I thought, you're lucky you got 4 years out of me, never mind 2 more for another degree or whatever. And so, but funny story, I actually did go back for a 5th year because I had 1 more year of hockey eligibility left, took a few classes, and then when hockey season ended, I quit going to class, became a personal trainer. I did that for a couple of years, and then it was all around that time where I was introduced to World Financial Group, and just kind of started to look at what the potential was and my current career as a personal trainer, and then what maybe the potential was if things went right here with World Financial Group, and I liked what I saw over here a lot better than what I saw over there, and so I started here part-time, transitioned full-time a few months later, and really just kind of haven't looked back since. And now it's growing all over. It's with the Zoom era that we're in now, and whatnot. We're literally expanding across Canada and into the US a little bit, which is fun. So, yeah, I never thought in 11 years I'd be getting paid in US dollars, but it works for me.
Yeah, no doubt, especially now.
Right?
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's sweet. Well,
So,
you talked about fitness a little bit there too, like your
yeah.
personal trainer.
Mhm.
Have you touched back on any of that at all, or is that taking a little bit of a back burner?
I mean, fitness is still a thing. I think if, personally, if you're not in any kind of decent shape, you can't really be the best version of yourself. So, so it's nice to have that, I don't know, that knowledge or that background or the habit, I guess, more than anything of, what does feel good, what does feel right to, keep the energy up and do that sort of thing. But I mean, when you've been in fitness for as long as I have, it changes and looks different every year, every month, every day almost. So
Oh,
yeah,
totally.
yeah, but
I guess the other part to that is I kind of ask everybody this, but especially you being like coming from that background, coming from a hockey background, coming from just, fitness was always part of life, right? Like that's just what it is. In your current job, like in the current job now with WFG, like do you see people pushing so hard? Like I see a lot of entrepreneurs, like, if you're not grinding, you're not 5 a.m., you're not making calls, you're not doing all this stuff. Like fitness always goes to the wayside, especially for men. Like, right, I can talk to men about or talk about men to this. Like, I know for myself, if I'm feeling down or feeling other things, fitness usually gets pushed back, right? Which is the thing that we should probably do first. But what do you notice on your teams and with everybody within you? Like, do people turn to you at all to ask questions about this? Do you see people falling to the wayside and even your own personal journey? Like, do you see
I
yourself kind
mean,
of putting that back?
yeah, yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, I think the first thing that goes is our eating. I don't
Mm.
want to say diet because that's a nasty four-letter word, but our eating and our foods, and not, and I just don't think people are aware of, how good they could feel if they ate properly and then exercised a little bit as well, right? And that's actually just something recently that I've discovered myself almost was that, exercise is one thing, but it's really a small part of the overall feeling good and having an energy equation, right? And so I've changed what I eat now over the last few months, and I definitely feel the difference. And yeah, it's weird though. It is definitely the first thing that tends to slip. It's like, oh, I'll go later, or I can just sneak this, food in and it won't bother me. But if you're like me, you're like you get crushed by a handful of Smarties a day kind of thing, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
mini chocolate bars were the worst invention for a guy like me. So,
Well, it's
just
funny
one.
that you say that, right? Like that, it really is. And for me, I know this, right? So I could always talk about myself of like food doesn't lie, right? Like
Hmm.
you wear it, obviously, right? So,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
could be doing the greatest, but you're always cheating, like you just said, little bit of chocolate bar, like a cookie here or there, whatever that is. And eventually it'll catch up to you. It might not, it won't
Hmm.
show the first few days or first week or whatever that is, but it'll get you. And you almost tell lies to yourself. I know I do. It's like, oh, it'll be okay, whatever. And then all of a sudden you gain 10 pounds. You're like, whoa, what just happened?
Right. It's that whole like slight edge effect. I mean, and the longer you're along in life, the more you start to notice that slight edge effect, right? Like it could take years of compounded chocolate bars before you really do notice it, but you will, and I did, and so yeah, so things had to change, and they did, and now we're on our way.
That's funny. When you talk to most men, I'm gonna gear this a little bit towards men because that's kind of what we do, or what I do. Um, when you're even in business, so like in your business, when you're talking to men, what's kind of the main point that guys come to you with? So like, hey Tyrell, I want to start this business. I want to do these things. Your team looks great. I want to like, can you mentor me? Where do you start, or how does that framework look a little bit for guys?
Well, I mean, it kind of looks the same. What I find the biggest difference between the men that I work with and the women is, and this might be a generalization, but men typically have a harder time taking direction or quote unquote asking for help and whatnot. And so, they got to kind of try it their own way. And I mean, this was me. I was no different, right? I'd seen it myself 11 years ago, or not even 11 years. I've seen it myself 5 years ago and so on. And even still to this day, right? There's things that I can do better. And but yeah, I think that's generally it. We feel like we got to go and, we know what to do, but we got to always see if we can make it better, right? Do it better or different or, find our own way that works, and then eventually they come around, or they quit, one of the two, but eventually they come around and they start to follow the system and the training and everything that we have implemented, and they start to have some success, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this stuff actually works, right? So that's probably what I find to be the biggest difference. Whereas, the women I work with, they're great. They're the best leaders in business, and they take direction, and then they do it, and then they build the confidence. All of a sudden they're doing it, and you don't even realize what's happening, neither do they, but it's good. So
do you see, I think you kind of mentioned it, do you see a lot of, I guess we'll call it drop off, or I don't want to say quitting, because quitting's a shitty
it's
word,
a hard word, eh?
it is it's tough.
Yeah.
But do you see quite a bit of drop off? Like you come in full of piss and vinegar and you're like, hey, I'm gonna make $1 million this month, and
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
What's kind of what do you see, like what's that final, this is a good one actually, like what's that final straw really that breaks the back usually for most people that you see in your teams anyway?
Yeah, I think it's just a lack of what they really want, and they're super comfortable with what they're getting, and there could be a lot of reasons why they feel like they're comfortable. Everybody gets fired up and wants to make a change in their life, but change takes work, and when that work hits, it just, that's it, right? It's like, and then I think, but the work becomes hard because they lose vision of what they really wanted, right? Like what they really got excited about in the first place, and they're like, well, it's been a month and it hasn't happened yet, so this is BS, or whatever. And so it's like, I don't feel like there's ever any one thing. It's usually like a layer of like, oh, you mean I got to run a schedule now? Oh, I gotta do this now, or oh, I got to add this in. And we try to do more in the same amount of time, right? Maybe we're not willing to get up a little earlier, or stay up a little later, or say no to chicken wings on a Wednesday night, or whatever it is, right? And to some of those things that maybe don't serve our vision or our goals. And so eventually I feel like that's kind of what takes people out, is they just lose the vision, and it's too hard, and they go back to where they were.
Yeah,
right?
It is. It's tough when you think of this life. Like, you and I have been both plugging away at this kind of lifestyle for quite a long time. And to be honest, for people that I know, like in my like just life, like real people that I grew up with, high school, all that fun stuff, there's maybe a handful of people that I know that can do this, sustain it, and really live this life, which is not easy, right? And it's, everyone thinks that it is, and it thinks that you're not working, or if you tell, probably to this day, right, you tell people what you do, and they probably get met with big wide eyes, because they're like, what do you mean you don't work every day? Or like, what do you mean you're not digging a hole? Or what do you mean you're not doing something, right? So it's quite an interesting thing. What do you find, what's people's biggest reaction when you do tell them what you do? Do they roll eyes? Do they get interested? What do you met with?
Well, it's hilarious, because when I tell people what I do, they're all like, oh, we should talk and whatever. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, we should. And then when it comes to like, okay, well, let's talk, it's like, oh, no, I'm not. And it could be, I don't know what the reason is. Maybe they feel embarrassed for the situation that they're in, or whatever. But I've been here 11 years. I've seen a lot of situations, and it's usually the ones that feel the most embarrassed that should be the least embarrassed. It's funny how it works, because they're usually more in line with what they want and got more going on. But it's initially some intrigue and whatever. And then, like I said, when it comes time to actually dig into it, it's 50-50 on whether they're actually going to follow up with that or not. So, and it's, the other thing I find too, though, is I think in our country, in Canada, like if you live an average life in Canada, you're living a better life than most people across the globe, right? And so there's that, it's really easy to become, I don't know, uncomfortably comfortable almost, where it's like, well, I got a roof over my head, my fridge is full, I've got gas in my tank and all that kind of stuff. So like, how much more do I really need? I got weekends off. I got a lake lot or whatever it is. And, so it's easy to be comfortable in Canada, in my opinion. But
no, it is 100%. And even with men, right? Like I've noticed it's easy to get comfortable with our bodies, with our relationships, with life, like you just said, career. And that was going to be my next point, was with men's work, because this entrepreneur just the whole entrepreneurial journey. There's so much self-development in it. It basically is, that's all you're doing is self-development. I find like after
Yeah,
being
exactly.
around it for so many years, right? So with like because men's work is like, I'm in it, like that's what I do and that's where I'm at. And those are a lot of the people I talk to and a lot of the listening I do and books I read and stuff like that. So when cause you're not in it as much, like what do you take when I say like men's work? What kind of hits you with that? What do you take it as, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're thinking like a traditional sense of a career or whatever, you think men's work's typically more laborious, right? More physical. I would build stuff with my hands and whatever, right? And I mean, I guess there's, it's true. I think if you looked at the overall, like who does that kind of work, it's a way higher percentage of men for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird identity thing, I think. I don't know. I just feel like I never really had that, like that need to be the physical, like hard labor type of person, if that makes sense. I don't know. It just
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because even when like when we were in like 18, 19, I remember you're doing concrete, right? And then
yeah.
like just summer job or whatever that was before school started, before hockey hit. And um, is that kind of like that was your taste of that kind of job, right? Obviously you grew up on a farm, worked, all that kind of stuff. We both did. But was that kind of your only, call it construction job, labor job, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure it was. That was pretty much the only like labor job I did. I mean, worked in the oil on a picker truck for a while too, but again, I just kind of, and I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, as I just saw what the people that have been doing it for 15, 20, 30 years as a career, kind of what, you know, their lifestyle and their body conditioning and all that kind of stuff. And I just was like, made a decision early. I'm like, well, that's not what I want, and I, like I said, wasn't exactly aware of that decision at the time, but I mean, I remember working with guys in concrete that were taking cortisone shots in every joint that they could just so they could go to work the next day. And, it was like, oh, that's the man thing to do, work through the pain. And I was like, what a stupid thing to do. I don't care who you are. Right. So, yeah, so then you transition. I mean, and it's a different type of work, right? I think, if you want to talk man's work, what about the work on ourselves, right? I think that's like where men shy away more than anybody is the work on themselves. This is who I am. This is who I'll always be. And, I'll be that way till I die. And it's like, well, you don't have to be, right? Like the hardest work you'll ever do is the work on yourself. And I mean, with what you do, you see that every day, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was alluding to. It's great that you went all the way to men's work, kind of blue chores, we'll call it. I talked to Carmen Nolan last week or week before. She called it like pink chores, right? And I was like, oh, that's a really good. I don't know how I never heard that, but it's funny, right? Because yeah, we're put into boxes, and you are this thing, and like for most men, it's construction, oil field, whatever that looks like, farming. Where we come from, a lot of forestry, right? So doing that kind of thing, and then doing more of an office job, it was always like, oh, the nerdy guy, or that, like, that's just
right.
I wore that myself. I used to say it all the time, like, I'm not smart enough to have an office job. And then I finally got my office and my big name plaque and all that fun stuff, and I was like, then I had some really weird feelings around, like, I'm not working hard enough, because my whole life I've worked like digging holes and pounding nails and doing things like that, right? So I had a lot to get through, and that's where the whole, like you just said, men working on themselves, the mental side of things was a big part of that, because I felt a bit of almost I felt a lot of things. There's a depression in that. There was like a really big imposter syndrome with that, because everyone around me had university degrees, all these other things, and I could literally barely spell my name because I haven't memorized. But I mean, it was just a lot to dig through, right? And then we have to make sure as men that we remember what we're good at and what got us there. Because these jobs, all this stuff that we do, doesn't happen by accident. You don't just fall into a corner office. You don't just fall into, being a leader of teams. It's, you work there. You have the skills to get there, right? So with most men on your team, and let's call it, no, not even that. Let's say yourself. What were the steps that you took yourself, even mentally, to kind of move in that self-development world and just take those steps to become, just to work on yourself and strive to be better?
Oh, geez. Yeah. Steps to start with. I don't know. You start small, I guess, was the big thing. I mean, it just, you put yourself in a room surrounded by people that are kind of where you think you want to be. And then you start to listen to what they're doing. And then you just kind of implement what you can, right? It starts early. I mean, like early on, I remember hearing, why I kind of transitioned careers was the whole interview your future, go to work and talk to somebody that's been there 20 years longer than you and see if that's a lifestyle you want. And if it's not, then maybe things got to change, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, and then so I changed careers and I look at the people that are, quote unquote winning at a high level. And I'm like, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that I'm not? And so you start that, and then you just kind of implement some things. And for me, it started with YouTube videos of the hip hop preacher Eric Thomas. I mean, he was been around a while, but I stumbled on his stuff, and I was like, hey, this is something like this got me going. And then you just kind of evolve from there. What's the next layer? And then it was, reading books, 10 pages a day. How many books can you read in a year? If you read 10 pages a day, it's minimum 12. The average book is 300 pages, 200 and some pages. So you get through a book a month, right? And then, and now with the access of things we have with podcasts and YouTube, and I mean, you can find information to get better anywhere. It's fairly easy to do, in my opinion. So, and then I guess the last thing too is I realized it's like pouring water into a glass. If you got a dirty glass of water and you pour 1 cup of water into it, it's not all gonna, be clear water after that little bit you pour into it. So you just got to keep doing it day in and day out, and eventually you don't recognize yourself in a good way.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. That's a great way to put it. And it's awesome that you mentioned YouTube, because that's how I started too. Because I'm not going to counseling. I'm not gonna call some guy and talk to him. I'm not gonna go meet up with people and talk to them about my issues, problems, feelings, any of that, right? So I really jumped on YouTube as well and found all those guys, just like you said. Yeah, like Eric Thompson. I got really into Greg Plitt, or Greg Plitt, with the more fitness side, mental side. And then it really dove into get into like Zig Ziglar and Jay Marone and all those guys, right? And they literally, all you got to do is sit there and watch those instead of watching Netflix, and you're just hit with a wealth of knowledge, right? And things that it might sound a little wonky the first few times you hear it, but then you start to let it sink in, and it's like, okay, I can really start to implement some of this stuff in my life. I also like how you talked about getting in a room with people. That's probably the biggest one, right? And I think Jim Rohn was the one that talked about that. You're the exact, like the average of the 5 people you hang out with, right? And you really see that in most men, like, because I can say this because I lived that, and that was me. And I mean, most people I was in a bar room most of the time, so those are the people I hung out with. And then with work, generally construction is, like I say, there's always those outliers and those few unicorns, but generally construction is a lot of negativity. It's a lot of like, woe is me, I'm stuck in this job. I say it all the time, of it was a summer job that didn't end, and it was just kind of there, and I just didn't, I had zero plan for my career, right? Because I barely made it through high school. So not like one of those career counselors or like whatever, those people. They weren't exactly like, hey Mike, what do you we should sit down and plan your university. It's like none of that happened, right? So it was just something that I fell into, and that's the story of most people in construction. It was a job, needed a bit of cash, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm gonna get a little raise, and then you're like turn around and you're 65 still digging a hole, and it's like, oh god, where'd my life go? So yeah, no, that's great. And like I say, it's getting those rooms. I know yourself even, right? Like I don't, do they still do them just because of the world we live in now? But like, I mean, invites, what is it, like once a month you get a bunch of people in a room, right? And able to talk?
Yeah, we used to do, I mean, weekly, and then bigger ones kind of quarterly and monthly and whatnot. They're starting to come back, but not as much as we used to, that's for sure. So, and now that they're coming back, I didn't realize how much you missed them until you're like, oh yeah, this was nice. we should do this more often.
Yeah,
But
definitely. It's nice to be around people. Well, like I say, I'm big. So we just talked a little bit about men's work, and then I'm really big because of my son, right? Like I'm big on preaching about raising, strong, honorable, protector type, provider type young men. I'm very fortunate because I get to do that, and I get to help my guy along. But what's it like? Because I mentioned before, you have 2 daughters. So what's it like on that side of things, being the dad that you are and raising 2 girls? What's that journey kind of look like? And what are you trying to instill, or what do you want to instill?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess like the cliche or whatever as it sounds is you almost want to raise daughters that don't need that type of man, right? Or don't need that man in their life and whatever. But so you try to implement, the skills where they can be independent and look after themselves and think for themselves and kind of do all that stuff, right? And so that's it. But at the end of the day, I think what it boils down to for me is just trying to be a good example when I'm around them and with their mom and stuff like that, of just, hey, listen, like if a guy's not willing to treat you well, then tell him to pound sand, right? Like you don't need that crap in your life. So that's what I just try to be really aware when all the time, but especially when we're all together, of just my actions and my words and my tone of voice and the volume of my voice and, just kind of all that stuff, right? So.
No, that's great. And then you nailed it by the example, right? Most guys, this is what I see, right? Like most guys, myself included, would come home kind of pissed off coming in the door, sit on the couch, and honestly, that was more of the night. Maybe like jump in the shower, eat food, and just be mad. Maybe have some bickering back and forth with the wife about whatever that looked like. And this is what your kids are seeing. Like that's their superhero sitting on the couch doing nothing, right? Like just getting mad at the world or mad at politics or mad at the news or whatever the list can go on, right? But being that example, especially you being a man in the house, surrounded by women, you have to show, right, that this is what a real man looks like. This is how a man treats his wife. This is how a man treats his family, how he treats his kids, how he treats himself, so that they have that example. That's awesome that you say that, because that's what we, again, try to do that with Lennox, with the relationship, and make sure he sees mom and dad, like, yeah, we talk, even if we have a disagreement, like he can be there with that disagreement, because it's not like we learned how to disagree. We learned how to communicate in that way of not, screaming, yelling, swearing at each other, really hurting each other. It's like, it's a disagreement 100%, but it's going to be, we can talk about it and figure it out. Right. So let them see that, so that they understand what it is. So it's not just behind closed doors, and then all of a sudden they get themselves in trouble when they find a partner or whatever that looks like. And they don't really know how to get around it, and they don't have to deal with the shit that, I've gone through, Laura's gone through, everybody's gone through, to try to like stop that generational stuff and then actually be present with it. No, that's awesome, man. And it's always funny because I don't know what's happening. We got a baby coming next month, or whatever, 4 to 8 weeks, I guess. There's kind of that window, so who knows? And we don't know, right? It could be a boy, it could be a girl. So it's very interesting, and I've often wrestled with it. It's like, what kind of dad would I be? Because being a dad to Lennox is really easy to me, right? Like, for one, I got Laura, so nothing's really gonna, like, she's a really good mom, right? So same with Julie, like, those kids are gonna be okay. So that's fine. But then getting to be the dad of, like, hey, we're gonna fight, we're gonna wrestle, we're gonna play sports. Like, I'm doing all the stereotypical stuff with guys a little bit, and then it goes into, we talk a lot about our feelings. We probably say I love you almost too much. We do a lot of like art, freaking play, like just all kinds of crazy stuff. So I've been very fortunate where I get to do almost a case study with guys, because I get to raise him like hard as, but then get to see that, like, get to do the soft side too. Which is very interesting. So it's going to be interesting with a girl. Like, I just don't know if we do have a girl. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do or how that's going to roll. Obviously nature will take its course, but
that's right. Yeah.
It's funny to actually talking to a dad. Like, what do you do that? Some of that, like, do you still fight with them, wrestle? Like, what's that look like?
Not so much that stuff, but you try, you try to play sports or whatever, right? Like play catch and whatever. And, but it's different. I shouldn't even say it's different. It's just their interest might be a little different. So you adapt, right? Like, but I also think too, is like, it's partly opened my eyes to, like, it's not boy girl. It's like, why can't girls do this too? Or, why can't boys do that too? Right. Like, whereas where we grew up in a small town, it was like, this is what the girls did and this is what the boys did. And you didn't really see the overlap between like the girls and the guys' sports or whatever. But like, our oldest is in gymnastics. And I'm like, back in the day when I thought gymnastics, that was kind of like one of those like, I don't know, fruity things for lack of a better term. But then you see gymnastics and you see what it's all about. And you're like, frick, I should have done gymnastics. Like, how cool would it be to be able to do some of that stuff, right? Like, I'm sure pound for pound, the strongest people in the world are gymnasts. Like, I don't know, just my humble opinion, right? So,
Oh, absolutely. Tell that to any guy. Go out there right now and go do an iron cross, and we'll see how far you get.
right? Like, see, so it's like, and that's, and then like fitness too. It's like, well, which is better, to lay on a bench and bench press 350 pounds, or like to be able to grab a bar and do some of the like calisthenic stuff that you see people doing with pull-ups and push-ups and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, which one's really better at the end of the day? I know which one I would choose, but that's each to their own. And so, yeah, so it just changes, your sporting stuff's a little bit different, there's maybe more tea parties or whatever, but I mean, girls are awesome too. Like our oldest, she's all about pranks, and I'm a little bit nervous right now. They're innocent because she doesn't know how to like, think of the scary ones yet, or the, not even scary, but like the really good pranks. So, but if she like keeps that train of thought of wanting to prank me and her mom as she gets older, we could be in for a lot of fun. So, which I never would have facilitated or not facilitated, but thought of coming from a girl before, right? Like a young girl, but she's like, yeah, she's all about trying to set up pranks and stuff. And so it's curious to see how that'll go. And then the youngest is like, we call her Maya the Destroyer. Like, she just will roll into a room and pull everything off the shelf, rip everything out of the cupboards, like, push stuff over. And I'm like, well, there you go. Like, it's not that different.
Oh, dude, that's awesome, man. That's fun. It's exciting to get to just you talking about that. It's gonna be fun to go through that stage again, because now kind of beat that out of Lennox, so he doesn't do that so much. So now it's gonna start all over again with someone else.
Yeah,
That's
it's coming.
sweet.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Now let's hear a word from our sponsor.
My husband and I have been struggling for about 10 years now since we met to have a good relationship, especially once we left the honeymoon phase where things weren't easy anymore. Communicating and letting go of resentments and intimacy were a few of our main issues that pulled us towards Safe and Wild. We loved how Mike and Laura flowed so well together when explaining everything, and that they laughed and joked along the way, making it fun to go through the course and learn new ways of taking on our marriage. We now communicate way better, which allows us to have more fun and spend less time being mad at each other. Safe and Wild gave us better tools to have a successful marriage and to be able to show our kids how to have one as well.
For more information, check out the show notes or check out therevivecouple.com.
This is another one that I really wanted to touch base with, kind of going into more relationship stuff. But like, how did that entrepreneurial journey change for you once Julie came into your life? Like, how did that go, even just dating and everything, and then into marriage?
Well, I mean, it changed everything. It really was like, I don't know, became the purpose, became the reason. It became like, the idea of why I started entrepreneurship in the first place was to be able to have this life where, all those things you said earlier, we could protect, provide, and do all that stuff, was exactly why I started it. And then I just kind of floated around for, 3 or 4 years. And then once I met Julie, it was like, okay, here's somebody that like, there's a reason and a purpose. And so it's time to buckle down and focus. And then, but we also didn't end up together by accident, right? Like, through the development that I'd done up on myself up to that point, it was like, well, this is the kind of partner that I want. And so then when Julie and I found each other, it was like, oh, okay, this is, if she'll have me, I'm definitely going to have her, right? And so here we are, I don't know, married for almost 5 years, 7 years together, a little more than 7 years together. So, but yeah, it just kind of changed everything. And it's been a great like partnership, I guess, at the end of the day. So,
Oh, that's deadly, buddy. I guess with that too, like, what do you recommend anyone out there listening whose husbands or wives or wanting to start this journey, wanting to start this entrepreneurial journey? It doesn't necessarily have to be with WFG. It doesn't have to be with anything, like whatever that looks like. What would kind of be your recommendations for that?
Oh, communicate.
Is that what it always comes down to?
It's
Yeah.
always what it comes down to. It's the only thing it comes down to, is just flat out communication, right? Because, I mean, and from both sides, right? Like, but especially if you're the one that's kind of stepping out and trying something new, you got to be open, got to let your partner know what it's about and what the end goal is and why you're doing what you're doing, but what you're doing. And then, you also got to make sure that you're doing what you're doing so you can show them at some point. It doesn't have to be a big result, but it's got to be results, right? Like, well, you say you're doing this stuff, but it's been 6 months. What do we have to show for it? And even if it's little things. And then you also got to be aware of like what they're going through. All of a sudden you're putting in extra hours, you're hanging out with different people, your language is changing. So imagine what your partner's going through, what your spouse is going through at that time, right? As they see you grow and develop, but now all of a sudden maybe they're taking on more chores at home, right? Spending more time with the kids, doing more bedtimes, doing more bath times, doing more meal time, so we got to be aware of their feelings and perception of things as well, right? So, but it all, again, boils down to communications from both sides. And I think doing that work on like what you mentioned with you and Laura is learning how to communicate, have disagreements without it being a full-blown, argument or, heated conversation kind of thing goes a long ways, right? And so, but that's been it. And I got Julie to thank for that because she's a lot better at it than I am, but I'm getting better, I like to think. But man, this communication, I think always communication's key, right? So
it is, because I keep hearing that from everybody. Because I was trying to come up with, I'm doing a lot of speaking with a lot of entrepreneurs in kind of your field, right? A lot of MLM, a lot of self-starters, not so much brick and mortar. But and just trying to figure out like what are some of the key areas and what are a lot of the commonalities. And I was going to kind of bundle it up and make a course out of this and try to help as many people as I could. But everything keeps coming back to communication. That's literally the only thing. There's some little nuanced things here and there from different people in different fields. But I mean, that's all stuff that gets picked up just organically because it's part of what you're doing every day. But the biggest underlying thing is always communication. And again, it's never perfect, and everyone thinks because Laura and I do like we're relationships and that's what we generally do is like, oh, you guys must never fight or must never do things. Like, no, that stuff is still there. Like the outside world is still there, our stuff that we do is still there. I fuck up all the time. Like I'm still there, right? Like that's what it is. Like I don't always take feelings into consideration because I got like a vision and I just kind of drive that way, and I have to get reined in. But it's having the tools to like, it's not going to fester for 4 days like it used to, or 5 days of just silence and anger and then magically dissolves. But I mean, it doesn't dissolve. It just goes in the background to come up at some other time. But to have the tools to like, feel those feelings, have all that, but then to get out of it, very quickly and to be able to come to an understanding where both people know where they're coming from. I think you made a good point too on showing results, because especially if it's a woman starting these jobs or these careers, it's a lot of the men is if they don't see something in a month, they're like, well, what are you doing? This is a waste of time. And then also harnessing some of those expectations too, and maybe listening to your husband's expectations or your wife's expectations, whatever that looks like, right? From the other side of, okay, I'll do this stuff. Like I'm willing to sacrifice, like you said, bedtimes, meals, all that stuff. But this is kind of what I'm expecting. And then you can talk about it and know that, okay, well, you can't expect to be driving a Ferrari in 3 months or anything like that, right? But, you're going to expect that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is, again, it's communication and enrolling them in the vision and helping them, helping them feel like they're a part of the journey, right? That they're a part of it. I mean, I think especially for a man, most times our ego can get in the way, right? When, your wife steps up and steps out and wants to be the provider, and it could be a bit of a blow, right? Like, and so I think maybe that's why if you're the supportive husband, it's, it's got to happen quicker because you're looking for that way out or that way back to where you're the person, you're the breadwinner, your little thing. Yeah, well, that little thing could change your life forever if you let it. But
yes, exactly. You nailed it with most men, right? Most men, our egos can't handle that, and they'll be sabotaged in that. Like your wife could be doing great things within any company, any business, and all of a sudden you'll sabotage it, or you'll keep throwing in her face like, "Hey, your kids would like to see you every now and then," or whatever that is. It's like babe, I'm doing this for us, for a reason, for sacrifice these 6 months this year of pushing, and we'll have all the time that we want together, right? But most men can't see that. I say men, but I mean, it goes both ways. But yeah, like most men can't see that, and then you feel emasculated because you're not bringing in the money. You're not the breadwinner, like you said before. Her vocabulary is changing. Her stature is changing. She might become even quasi famous within her group, within her people, within online stuff. So she's getting a lot more attention, which is really shining a spotlight on most men's insecurities and like, oh God, now she's gonna leave me because she's gonna see what I really am. So there's just so much behind that, right? And then I think that doubles back to men's work on, you really have to look at yourself and be okay with yourself and be confident with yourself. And if you are that guy at home helping, cooking those meals, you fucking cook the best meals. If you're putting your kids to bed, you have the best fucking bedtime there possibly is, right? Like you read the shit out of that lullaby.
Tell the best damn stories.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's very funny but you got to be able to switch that, because it's so easy to be, oh, woe is me. And my life sucks. My wife's making all the money and now I can't even do this. And I'm going to sabotage it. And then you're just, like you said, comfortably uncomfortable in that shit. Right. And just stay in there. And that's what life is.
One big vicious cycle.
Oh, absolutely. Well, buddy, I think we touched on a lot of topics here. I think we might as well wrap it up at that and let you go. But it's been awesome talking to you and picking your brain on some of this stuff. What's the best way for people to find you?
I don't know if there's a best way, but probably social media, I guess. Instagram, I don't post a lot, but I am on there. Check things out. Email, tyrell.shep@gmail.com is probably the simplest way to get a hold of me or whatever, reach out. So,
what's the social media handle?
What is it? Tyrell.shep. So if you just go on Instagram, look up Tyrell.shep, you should find me there. And as I look at it, I probably should update my picture because I'm missing the daughter in it, but it's all good.
That's awesome. Too busy grinding, buddy. I don't got time for social media.
That's right.
Deadly. Okay, buddy. Well, it was great talking to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
You betcha, my friend. Appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for listening. Check out our offerings on social media at The Revived Couple and online at therevivedcouple.com. Have a request for a show topic? We love that. Send us an email at michael@larocklife.com or DM @therevivedcouple.
And don't forget to rate, subscribe, and review.